U.S. citizen Rinaldo Nazaro started the group in 2018 as a network for radical right nationalists readying for armed conflict, and then moved to St. Petersburg and took up Russian citizenship, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington-based think tank. So, he's a U.S. citizen. In 2020, FBI agents arrested a Canadian Armed Forces reservist, Patrick Jordan Matthews, and 2 other members of the base who were allegedly plotting a terror attack at a pro-gun rally in Virginia. The following year, Matthews was sentenced to 9 years in prison in Maryland. Last year, the European Union added the base to its terrorist list, placing sanctions, including a travel ban and a freeze on assets in Europe. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the group's an anti-Semitic white nationalist network that trains members in survivalism and paramilitary skills to prepare them to mount an armed resistance against the government. Made up of small terroristic cells, the base believes society should be pushed to collapse so a white ethno-state can rise out of the ruins. So that's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So here's my thing, right? They found this neo-Nazi group had ties to people in the United States. Where have we heard this before? I know you know where I'm going. All right, let's go there. White supremacists. They are a hallmark of the United States. They have been here ever since its inception, even in its conception. White supremacists have existed on this very land, but it has also been products of Europe, which have been brought over here, but it also still stays at home in a large way. But there's a news story that recently came out about white supremacists being found that have ties to the United States in Spain. So I want to get into that story because it is very deep, and we're going to get into this right now. So I would like to get into the story. This is out of CBS News. It's about to get ridiculous, y'all. It says, U.S.-founded neo-Nazi group designated as terrorist organization is busted in Spain. It says Spanish police on Monday said they have broken up a cell of The Base, a transnational neo-Nazi white supremacist group designated a terrorist organization by the European Union, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. You notice here that they didn't say it was designated a terrorist organization by the United States. That's sus. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. All right, let's continue on. The U.S.-founded movement operates through decentralized international network of paramilitary cells that aims at perpetrating attacks and preparing for a race war. It says an investigation launched earlier this year uncovered a Spanish cell whose members were highly radicalized and had training using paramilitary techniques and equipment. In recent months, the suspects had encouraged violent acts, even stating openly that they were prepared to carry out targeted attacks for the cause. The leader of the cell was in direct contact with the group's founder, who 1 month ago called for targeted attacks within the aim of bringing down Western democratic institutions. That was quoted by him. Police arrested 3 suspects last week, including the leader, who was in custody on charges of membership of a terrorist organization, recruitment and indoctrination, and training with terrorist aims, and illegal possession of weapons. They also seized firearms and munition and neo-Nazi paraphernalia during raids in the eastern province of Castilla. Police released a video showing officers raiding the property and handcuffing suspects. The videos also show officers seizing guns and other weapons, as well as books with former Nazi leader Adolf Hitler on the cover. I'm going to tell you this. I watched this. I was questioning whether I should stop at certain moments to pause so that I can skip over it, but it's filled with so much paraphernalia and weapons that I cannot show it on YouTube. But I'm going to tell you this right now. They had a lot of weapons. Like Neo said in The Matrix, guns, lots of guns. They had that. They had guns, they had blades, they had knives, they had paraphernalia, they had books with Adolf Hitler on the cover. They had Nazi flags. This was basically, it's as if Richard Spencer barfed all over the table. Like, is that bad? Okay. And so that video, they show a police raid. The police looked like they were in SWAT gear. This is in Spain. They were in SWAT gear and they came in and, they showed them arresting these guys. By the way, these also neo-Nazis also had pairs of handcuffs on them as well. So just to let you guys know about that. I just got to be careful on YouTube. It says U.S. citizen Ronaldo Nazzaro started the group in 2018 as a network for radical right nationalists readying for armed conflict, and then moved to St. Petersburg and took up Russian citizenship, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington-based think tank. So he's a U.S. citizen. In 2020, FBI agents arrested a Canadian Armed Forces reservist, Patrick Jordan Matthews, and 2 other members of the base who were allegedly plotting a terror attack at a pro-gun rally in Virginia. The following year, Matthews was sentenced to 9 years in prison in Maryland. Last year, the European Union added the base to its terrorist list, placing sanctions, including a travel ban and a freeze on assets in Europe. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the group's an anti-Semitic white nationalist network that trains members in survivalism and paramilitary skills to prepare them to mount an armed resistance against the government. Made up of small terroristic cells, the base believes society should be pushed to collapse so a white ethno-state can rise out of the ruins. So that's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So here's my thing, right? They found this neo-Nazi group had ties to people in the United States. Where have we heard this before? I know you know where I'm going. All right, let's go there. Let's take a look at this. Oh, what are you looking here? From World War II to space race, the story of Project Paperclip. If you don't know about Project Paperclip, Operation Paperclip, as it is affectionately known, then you're about to learn today. You're going to learn today. It says between 1945 and 1960, the United States government brought more than 1,500 German scientists and engineers into the country through Project Paperclip to work on guided missiles, jet and rocket engines, aerodynamic, aerospace, medicine, and submarine technology. The U.S. hoped these specialists can give them an advantage at the end of World War II and into the Cold War. Over time, many of the Germans disappeared into American military, industrial, and academic positions. However, one of them, Werner von Braun, became prominent through his involvement in the space race. The discussion explores Project Paperclip with Dr. Michael Newfield, senior curator at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. And so, so it talks about Operation Paperclip here. But Operation Paperclip was ultimately an operation that was done post-World War II to bring Nazi scientists and engineers to the United States. It wasn't anybody who was a victim of the Holocaust. It was perpetrators of the Holocaust brought to the United States in order to help them win the Cold War against the very nation that defeated the Nazis. Remember, it wasn't really the United States that actually dealt the real true blow to the fascists. in Europe. It was the Soviets, it was the communists that actually dealt the decisive blow and many other subsequent blows in order to defeat Nazism and fascism. And the United States came in kind of late to the party to do it, because ultimately they didn't really want to fight against them. The other piece that a lot of people don't realize is that the United States wanted the USSR, Soviet Russia in particular, to fall, not because it saw it as a danger to citizens of the United States, but because the ideas and the economic system that they had was proven to be a threat to what the United States had in place, which was basically an exploitative system of capitalism. And so if people in the West, particularly the United States, looked at Russia or the Soviet Union at the time and saw that they were doing materially better than the rest of us, then that could influence the United States, the people of the United States, to push towards a more socialist system, which would threaten the power of the capitalists at that time. And so it was basically the equivalent of you live in broke and poor because your parents really don't want to do much for you, even though they could. And then you're looking through that window and your house and your next door neighbor, actually, they're doing really good for their kids. And you notice that your parents also have the ability to do the same, but your parents just don't want to. And then you're like, you start looking at your parents kind of sideways. Like, wait, they could do that for them, so that means you could do that for us. And it's not like they live in a completely different neighborhood. We both live in the same neighborhood, but why are we being treated like trash when the kids across the way are being treated really good? Right? So this is why they really wanted to get rid of the Soviet Union, because essentially their material needs were being taken care of more. Also, in addition to that, in the Soviet Union, they also were basically telling Black people, hey, the people over there, they're white supremacists. They don't like y'all. And so y'all don't need a system like that, because they're harming you guys left and right just to keep you guys divided. I reflect on Paul Robeson when he actually said that he felt like a full human being, a full man, a full human being when he actually visited the Soviet Union. Paul Robeson was an actor and a Black man, a singer as well. And so this is one of the reasons why they wanted to have the Cold War. The Cold War was not really necessary, except from a capitalist perspective, in order to keep capitalism in place so that people won't look to greener pastures. And so they employed the enemies of those greener pastures, the fascists and the Nazis, in order to be able to help them win the war against a system that would actually be better for the American people. I wouldn't say it's perfect, not by any means, but it would definitely be better for the American people. With that being said, Operation Paperclip was employed, and by we mean the United States government, brought Nazis over, gave them homes, gave them jobs, and let them roam free in our cities and streets, indoctrinating our children and families and neighbors with their disgusting ideology of supremacy, white supremacy. And so this kind of makes sense because, well, the Nazis actually learned what they did from the United States and how they treated the Native Americans as well as Black American freedmen. And so this is what Operation Paperclip was. And so it goes without saying, this is why I look at this as suspicious. Because ultimately, this US-backed neo-Nazi group in Spain, is it just a couple of lone wolf actors that are actually pushing for something like this? Or is this something more? And this is one of the reasons why I look into what the CIA is actually doing. Because ultimately, I feel like they would need right-wing extremism in order to be able to take hold and keep hold of what's going on now, because a lot of polls are showing that young people, it's like the majority of young people now are favorable towards socialism. And so that means the capitalists are seeing the system slip through their fingers now. And so instead of keeping just regular plain old neoliberalism around, which kept people like, myself, Gen X, and baby boomers around and kept us on a hook, now they're going to have to go to more extreme methods, because the younger people, they see through the BS. They see through exactly the lies that have been told to us. And so I don't put anything past the CIA. Remember, we had a CIA president. His name was George Herbert Walker Bush. He was head of the CIA for some years. So it's without saying that the CIA is deeply entrenched in what the United States does here and abroad. This is actually just a couple weeks ago. This is out of Axios. It says suspected National Guard shooting near White House helped the CIA. Says the suspect in Wednesday's shooting of 2 West Virginia National Guard troops as an Afghan national who entered the U.S. in 2021 after working with the CIA and other U.S. government agencies during the war. CIA Director John Ratcliffe tells Axios in a statement. So it says, after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Biden administration justified bringing the alleged shooter to the United States in September 2021 due to his prior work with the U.S. government, including CIA as a member and partner of the force in Kandahar. It says the guard members from. So it talks about how the guards were shot by this gentleman who says was an act of terror. But here's the crazy part: it is not out of the norm for the United States or the CIA to bring horrible, depraved people to their country, to our country, in order to grow these supremacist ideologies, to let them fester here. And the crazy part is like we've had, like, for instance, we've had white supremacist groups run roughshod in this country for, the entire country's history, and yet they're still around. We can't even weed them out. And it's like, why can't we weed out these white supremacist groups? Why can't we get rid of these white supremacist groups in the United States? Why is there more attention placed on groups that are more about actual liberation of marginalized groups than there is more attention given to these white supremacist groups? Well, ultimately, it's because the United States government is actually in league with these groups, or they will turn a blind eye to these groups because they actually kind of agree with what they do. A lot of people don't want to say it, but hey, it's true. We live in a very white supremacist system. And so this is not really surprising to me. This is why, as soon as I read that headline from CBS News, I was like, well, what has the CIA been doing this time? And so in order to be able to keep a stronghold, a foothold on the system, on the people, well, you got to do some scapegoating. You got to make sure that these extremists, they keep their numbers up. In order for them to be able to keep their numbers up, well, you got to let them grow. You got to let them develop a little bit. And so the United States government will allow that, because then that keeps the working class divided. And so you have these white supremacists, or these guys who lead lonely ass incel lives without ever being able to touch a human being, Nick Fuentes. And so therefore they get to a point where they end up needing community, and they get community in a form of a bunch of uh pasty face, pizza face looking incels that sit in their room all day and ain't got not one goddamn ounce of vitamin D because they keep the shutters closed. And so therefore they're like, hey, well, we hate all these people, so let's hate them together. Yay, community. And so this is exactly what you get. This is why I stay so brown, because I get my vitamin D when I'm outside. Anyways, so this is the problem that we have, is that the United States will continuously go new phone, who this, when it comes to these groups. So this is why I look at somebody like a John Ratcliffe and I'm like, bro, what have you been doing? How many people knew who the CIA director is? And so whether it's Ratcliffe, I think it was John Brennan was the former CIA head of the CIA. But all these guys that were part of the CIA, they essentially, their job is to keep Western and U.S. supremacy, and really U.S. supremacy is tied to white supremacy. They want to keep that as high as possible. So they make sure that this spreads abroad. And so this is why I look at events like this and I'm like, wait a minute. This smells like U.S. intelligence. Let me share this here as well. And people are asking, what is the base? That's what they call themselves. They can't even get clever anymore and come up with an actual name. They just came up with the base. It's weird. It says, what is the base? FBI arrest of alleged white supremacists put focus on extremist group. The decentralized neo-Nazi movement has chapters across the United States and the world, and experts say members' threats of violence should be taken seriously. And so these are members of the base, right? So this came out in 2020. David Holden, the president of a small synagogue in rural Michigan, had never heard of the base until his house of worship was defaced last fall. So it says the FBI's pursuit of alleged members of the group widened, with authorities in Georgia announcing charges Friday against 3 additional men accused of belonging to the base and plotting to overthrow the government and murder a couple. Now, says members of the base allegedly spray painted at least one synagogue in Race, Washington, with swastikas, the anti-Semitic language. Authorities also suspect this case is linked to one at Temple Jacob. So these are actual anti-Semites, not what members of the ADL want to call anybody who criticizes the state of Israel. But these are real anti-Semites that are actually a danger to society. But the United States, they'll tacitly go after maybe a few, but they won't really do a real takedown of them. And so it just goes to show how the United States, constantly, they'll placate like, oh yeah, we're actually going after them, when in reality they don't. And so that's one of my biggest questions, right? It's always suspicious when you see when you see groups like this come about. Let me go here as well. And this is out of the Jacobin magazine. It says Spain's far-right Vox Party is inciting race violence. The Vox Party is typically masks racism, more palatable rhetoric, but this summer, leading Vox MPs helped incite violence against residents of Maghrebi origin in the Murcia region in Spain. So it says the violence of Torre Pacheco, which began on July 11th, followed several less severe but similar incidents. Days early, Sabadell, a working class neighborhood in Barcelona, has seen multiple nights of racist attacks against migrant residents, triggered by protests over insecurity allegedly caused by squatters of foreign origin. That same week, a mosque in the town of Piera, near Barcelona, was set on fire just before its inauguration. Islamophobia and racism against workers from Morocco and other North African countries are the most common forms of racism in Spain. In previous years, there have been attacks on centers of housing unaccompanied migrant minors, particularly in Catalonia and the Madrid region. However, the summer's string of racist incidents marks a qualitative shift. It reveals that the far right has chosen a strategy of racist propaganda through violence. And so, not only is this being utilized, in places like Spain, but it's also being pushed by residents in the United States in order to be able to grow this this fascistic white supremacist type of ideology more abroad so that it can continuously come here. So if the CIA was actually serious about spreading democracy and protecting the United States, they would be trying to take down these agencies. But you never hear about the CIA trying to take these agencies down. Never. Hell, I doubt the FBI really does much against these white supremacist groups anymore either. I think they just watch a little bit and then just stay back. Versus they're actually trying to go after the ones who are actually threatening power on behalf of working class people, which is the left. So keep your eyes out for what's going on in this country. If we start seeing more white supremacist groups pop up, something tells me the alphabet agencies are behind the whole thing. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here.